Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Veterinary Business Podcast, your ultimate resource for developing a successful veterinary practice and career. I'm Dr. Peter Weinstein, one of the co-hosts of the Veterinary Business Podcast. On this podcast, we bring you insights and expertise from industry-leading doctors, experts, and thought leaders. We cover a wide range of topics, including practice management, marketing, finance, leadership, HR, law, and much, much more. So whether you're a practicing veterinarian, a practice owner, a practice manager, a wannabe veterinary student, or anybody who is part of the veterinary team, this podcast is tailored to help you navigate the unique, oh yes, unique challenges and opportunities in the business of veterinary medicine. Every listener of this podcast is welcome to visit the website at www.veterinarybusinessinstitute.com for additional resources and tools to support your growth. You can also subscribe to our podcast on all of the major podcast networks, iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, et cetera, et cetera. Today, I am excited to talk to Dr. Christie D'Andrea and Dr. Rebecca Swimmer. Now, you may be trying to figure out, how did I find two such lovely ladies? It's all luck. Dr. Christie is a veterinarian and founder of Veterinary Urgent Care Center. Dr. Rebecca is a veterinarian and founder and CEO of Vet Villa. And our topic today is from classmates to entrepreneurs. Hello, Dr. Christie and Dr. Rebecca. Welcome to the show. It is so wonderful to have you here.
Hi, Peter. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So this is part of the 1 degree of separation in the veterinary field. In February, at the Western Veterinary Conference, also known as Viticus, also known as Prince, I was fortunate to meet Dr. Christie D'Andrea through a mutual friend and a business associate, Kelly Detweiler, because we were starting to do some work to help Dr. D'Andrea with her practices. And so we met for coffee and talked for about 45 minutes or an hour or so and just got to know one another. And then later that same day, I am at the president's reception or whatever it's called, you know, where everybody's dressed up in fake black ties and suits and everything else. And a mutual friend and a really good person, Stuart, introduced me to his boss because he had been talking so many great things about Dr. Swimmer. Give Stuart a raise. And so I had a chance to meet Dr. Rebecca Swimmer, and Dr. Swimmer is from the Los Angeles area, so we had a lot of overlap from that standpoint. But I didn't know that my morning coffee and my evening reception knew each other until afterwards. And all of a sudden, here I have two young entrepreneurs who I found out were classmates in Tufts, of all things, because I got one in California and one in New England. And it was just so cool to say, all right, how do we find two individuals, completely different sides of the country, that I get to meet as the common thread in some fashion, and I have to talk to you both at the same time. So that's how this all came to the fore. Now, I need to know how you each made your roads to veterinary school. And let's start with Rebecca. Were you Dr. Barbie veterinarian when you were growing up?
I actually was, in the sense of I had seen the Black Stallion returns when I was 5 years old. And ever since then, I had wanted to become a veterinarian. So I was always looking for volunteer opportunities, volunteering at the local shelter. Our primary veterinarian was wonderful with giving me opportunities. So this was in between growing up through high school. I always had part-time jobs, and working veterinary hospitals was something I was able to do in a volunteer aspect. And then when I went to college, I was a major at University of Illinois in animal science. And at some point, I actually started to do neurobiology research because I was interested in exploring research, but also with making my resume look better for vet school. At some point, I got just very, very interested also in neurobiology, and I ultimately got accepted to University of Illinois Vet School. And I remember telling my mom that I got accepted, and I remember her crying, happy tears. And then I told her, but I'm not going to go. And so she cried harder. And so at that point in time, I decided I was going to pursue a PhD in neurobiology. And so that's actually what brought me out to Boston, is that I was in grad school there. And at some point midway through, I realized that my dream of going to veterinary school was still my ultimate dream. And so I diverted, and that's how I made my way to Tufts.
And I forgot that we were both Illini at one point in time. I, being a vet school graduate, and you having attended from that standpoint. So this, again, this whole small world thing is just really pretty cool. So, Christie, you didn't go to University of Illinois.
I did not, but I went to University of Michigan.
Uh-oh. Well, then this conversation is now over.
I was wondering when would be the right time to drop that.
Did you have a similar Dr. Barbie growing up wanting to be a veterinarian, or did you think that you might be like a mechanical engineer or something?
I wanted to be a marine biologist. I had no intention of becoming a veterinarian. It was not on my radar at all, actually. I did my undergrad at Michigan. I actually started at community college, my local community college, and transferred into University of Michigan, where I studied biology and biochemistry. Graduated with my bachelor's and still pursuing my interest in marine biology. I came out to New England and did an internship at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, Marine Biological Laboratory. That's when my path was a little bit similar to Rebecca's. I became very interested in research and started applying for different positions in the research community, and ultimately actually ended up at MIT doing comparative medicine. So my interest developed a little bit differently. My interest was more in emerging infectious disease, science, publications, and in doing more work in emerging infectious disease, I really wanted to pursue that that sort of, that passion that you have as a young student. You want to save the world. I was really interested in that direction. And I felt that pet medicine, animal medicine was sort of the basis of zoonotic disease. To pursue that, I needed to go to veterinary school. So I applied to Tufts University with a dual degree program and started my master's degree in public health in conjunction with my DVM. I really fell in love with veterinary medicine. I fell in love with my colleagues. I fell in love with patient care. As I went through veterinary school, I started to enjoy it more and more. When I got out of veterinary school, I actually ended up going not that direction. I actually ended up going into small animal medicine and really loved it. I loved the relationships that I developed with my clients. I really loved the medicine aspect. What I love most about veterinary medicine is problem solving. I think it really touched into that space where I liked to look at a problem and figure it out. And veterinary medicine offers you a unique ability to do that across endocrinology, across dermatology, across surgery. It really gives you carte blanche to really dive into all of those things so differently than any other profession. You can't do that in human medicine. It's so siloed in human medicine. Whereas in vet med, we get to do all of those things. And to me, that really spoke to my passions and what I really love to do every day.
So to all our listeners, you are listening to a bunch of underachievers, classic in veterinary medicine. We had two people who probably could be paradox, basically DVM PhDs, who had all sorts of different directions. Interestingly, both of you from the Midwest, ended up in New England and ended up in veterinary school together. Correct me if I'm wrong, you had never met each other prior to matriculating into the freshman class at Tufts University.
That's correct. We first met each other in an anatomy lab.
I remember.
Were you part of that group that was doing the dog dissection together?
We were.
We were doing a horse.
Oh, so you started with the horse. Okay. We started with the dog. So you were arguing whether it was the internal carotid or the jugular. Is that
I think it was the latissimus dorsi or the trapezius incus.
We learned later from one of our professors that you can either name it and cut it or just cut it.
There is some truth to that. As a veterinarian, it's like if it has a name, you don't want to cut it, especially if it's an artery or a nerve. if it's a muscle, if you're going to cut it, you better know where it goes back to. So, but it doesn't, you don't need to know the name, just like this is point A and that's point B. So really cool. So you became part of this group doing anatomy. What was it about each other that that you think kind of piqued the friendship? Any thoughts?
I think we've always been great at giving each other a healthy challenge. So we've always kind of expanded our thoughts on various subjects. And I think that's one of the high points of our friendship, is that we challenge each other to do better and to do more.
I immediately noticed Rebecca's tenacity. Immediately. She
Likewise.
is probably one of the most tenacious people I have ever met, and highly, highly intelligent.
And I can say the absolute same about Christie. So thank you.
We're having a love fest today, aren't we?
It's true though, like in terms of, as we expand this conversation and we talk about entrepreneurship, part of that is going to be tenacity and resiliency. And that is, just at the forefront of being able to do what we have done, because it's not all highs by any means. And so as we kind of route our way through this conversation, we'll definitely touch on that. But I think those are two characteristics that are pretty important for making entrepreneurship work.
I would agree with Rebecca on that. And I would also add grit. And I think that grit probably goes back to our Midwestern roots. And I don't want to discount anyone else in the country, but I do think that Midwesterners do have a grit to them. And I think I think it goes unrecognized sometimes in truly what it takes to get from start to success.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. In the middle of my page where I'm taking notes, I wrote down Midwest when you were both speaking.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in the Northeast and went to vet school in the Midwest. And I think most Midwesterners are full of grit. And I should have enunciated, but full of grit. But I do think that it is something that we used to look for when we were hiring, is people who had a background outside of California. I think there's a certain toughness that occurs when you're in those the states in the Midwest. So I give you credit from that standpoint. Now, veterinary medicine, and even in veterinary school, is an extremely competitive situation. I mean, you guys are both in class, and there's only so many A's they give away. And would you ever find yourself in a competitive role, or did you just really find yourself supporting each other?
I think it's always had a balance.
Yeah, I think Rebecca and I both, I don't think either one of us really, I don't recall, I don't think either one of us were really focused on the grades. There were people in our school, in our class, that were focused on the grades. What I recognize most from Rebecca is that we really wanted to learn. We didn't want to pass the test or ace the test. We wanted to learn the material. We wanted to get it right. We wanted to do it right. We wanted to keep doing it until we got it right. And I think that the A is great. It's cool to pat on the back for doing the right thing. But again, and I think this is one of the reasons why Rebecca and I, became friends and stayed friends, is because that our focus wasn't on getting the A. Our focus was on learning and supporting each other in our learning.
And we would really expand on our, we would be taking a test on X, Y, or Z, but we would really go well above and beyond in terms of expanding our knowledge base. And it wasn't for, like Christie notated, it wasn't for the grade. It was just, I think, purely because we were genuinely interested in it.
I think one of the messages for the veterinary students who may be listening to this is to find a colleague, to find somebody you can collaborate with, because it's very lonely in veterinary school. And to have somebody who can commiserate, and your parents cannot commiserate with what you're going through, unless they're like me and has a daughter who went to veterinary school, they can't commiserate with what you went through. So I think having that partner in crime, the Butch Cassidy to the Sundance Kid, or George and Gracie, or Fred and Ethel, whatever you want to put together, Ricky and Lucy. I'm running out of pairs, but
well, it wasn't just the two of us. We had a tribe.
Oh.
We had a tribe. We had a great group, and we're all still friends.
So let's divert to your tribe just a second. I'm curious, did did other members of your tribe become entrepreneurs as well?
They are currently cardiologists, dermatologists.
Yeah, they're all, I think most, everybody is board certified.
Yeah.
So they had definitely an extra drive and motivation.
So you created them to become diplomats and lead things in your own way, and you became entrepreneurs to develop things in your own way. So did you each know that you had that entrepreneurial spirit in veterinary school? And maybe go back a little bit to each of your parents. Were your parents small business owners or entrepreneurs? Did they have an influence from that standpoint? So were either of you from entrepreneurial parents?
My father is a CPA, and so he had his own practice. My mom was his office manager, and so I grew up with seeing my father as, you know, directing kind of his own path. One of the things that struck out to me as a kid growing up is that they were at every soccer game, they were at every play, every musical. So they were very active. And I felt that because they had their own practice, they were able to kind of modify their schedule. And that may have meant that he worked, you know, earlier in the day, or he went back to work after the soccer game, but he was very present. And so for me, that was important. And the answer is no. I thought I was going to be a clinically practicing doctor for the entirety of my career. That was where my passion is, and things kind of morphed along the way. After I left Harvard for grad school, it was an immediate entrance into vet school in terms of I missed kind of the cutoff periods, and so I had to have some time. So I worked as a financial advisor for Prudential at that time. So I started to get more acumen at that point in time in terms of financial and business. But I was also working as a makeup artist, working full jobs. So it's just one of those things where, you know, you kind of, your path goes in a different directions, and you gain things along the ways. And it's been a great ride.
So if you can't make people money, you can at least make them look good.
That's the hope.
She does both very, very well. It was interesting. And the only reason I know that is because we were all getting ready for something. And Rebecca just shows up with this. And of course, I know her as this highly intelligent, very successful person. And she just shows up with this makeup kit. I was like, oh, you're an artist. She's so good at it.
It's my only artistic outlet. And now I don't have time for it.
No, where you work too much. My path was significantly different. Neither one of my parents were entrepreneurs. My father is a retired U.S. Marine. My dad is actually a gunnery sergeant, or was a gunnery sergeant. My mother mostly raised me as a single mom. My parents split when I was young, and we struggled. To be honest, you know, family help was just not an option for me. We didn't have a lot of family support. I actually was on my own at actually before the age of 18, had an apartment with a friend, and put myself through community college, and you know, made my way along this path. And my parents have been there sort of peripherally in the background, but just really not as involved, and not able to be as involved as some other parents were. So yeah, it's you learn things in with both directions, right? If you have parents who are supportive, and if you have parents who aren't.
So you both saw a work ethic in different ways. You know, from the military standpoint, that organization, time management, you know, all of that comes from being in the military. And Rebecca, our world gets even smaller. My dad was a CPA as well.
Oh.
And I was born on April 16th. And so my mom was sitting around with her legs crossed.
Well.
Yes, good timing. So
there's one more commonality that I just identify with Christie, is that my dad was he's in the Marines as well. He was a reserve in the Marines.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either until we were chatting.
Wow. This is like, we could make this into a TV show.
Semper Fi.
Semper Fi.
Always.
So you got to graduation. You survived 4 years. Actually, you know, if you think about it, you're very tight for 3 years, and then you do your externships in your fourth year, and you're all over the place. So you start to splinter with this group of 5 or so, and you get to graduation, and Rebecca, did you head west right after graduation, and Christie, did you stay east? I mean, that must have been a really teary going away party when it came down to it.
It was. I grew up in Chicago suburbs and then was in Boston for 10 years for grad school and vet school. And so chose California as an opportunity to spend 1 year without a winter. And that's truly the reason why I chose it. And then we had 10% of our graduating class actually went to Southern California. And so it felt like I had some closeness there, some contacts. And so that was how I made my transition. And then one day in February, I was walking to my internship in scrubs, and Boston and Chicago was covered in snow. And it was all over Facebook, and all of my friends were texting me pictures of misery. And that was the day I fell in love with Los Angeles. And I haven't looked back.
And Christie, you never went too far.
I didn't. I had been in Boston for several years before vet school, and I had a very, very strong friend group in the city of Boston prior to going to vet school. So I had a network within the city that that I was still pretty close with. So as a matter of fact, I actually didn't spend my final year in Grafton. I actually had an apartment in the city for my final year of vet school. Still very close to all my vet school friends, but had that sort of those historical connections in the city of Boston.
So did you have telephone calls every once in a while between LA and Boston? Did you kind of commiserate about your challenges? Did you cry about your first jobs and internships?
All of the above.
Pretty much.
So you didn't lose the network. You basically took that anatomy artery and or umbilical cord and stretched it across the country 3,000 miles.
Absolutely.
Which one of you had the entrepreneurial seizure first?
We did it at the same time, unknowingly.
Yeah, we were pretty closely timed. So I opened my hospital July 5th, 2018 was when we opened. And I remember Christie saying like, hey, I've got this idea. Is this a crazy idea? And I said, no, it's actually brilliant. So she posed the idea of an urgent care.
Actually, wait, weren't you 20? I was February 2017. I think you were July 2017.
I think 2018.
I think you were 2017. Because I opened February 7th, 2017.
Because Natalie was born in 2017 of April. And so it was 2018 for me. Yeah.
It was 2018 for you. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I was in construction for much longer than I had hoped for.
Well, yeah, yes, that's true. You were doing it, but you were under construction.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So the opening date was a little bit delayed for Rebecca because of her lovely contractors. Yes, if there's one thing that I think we would both agree is that choose your contractors wisely.
That's a whole nother podcast.
Yes. That's the whole entrepreneurial podcast of surrounding yourself with the right team members from that standpoint.
In general, though, it really happened completely independently at the same time.
Yes.
And I do remember that phone call, Rebecca, when I called her and I said, am I crazy? She was the first person I called. Am I crazy?
And it was brilliant.
And she said, I'm actually doing.
I'm like, I'm too far into pivot, but it's brilliant. Go with it.
So you were both insane at the same time.
Yes.
And you mentioned that, Rebecca, that you were having your first child at the same time that this was all going on.
Yeah. So Natalie was born in 2017, and I remember writing business plans with her on one of those little nursing pillows. And she was very colicky. And so she was crying all the time unless I held her. And so I watched like 12 seasons of Grey's Anatomy as I'm typing business plans and looking at architectural drawings and finding contractors and piecing all of it together, going through permitting, all those things. And so, and I would go to the construction site with her and little baby Bjorn. So it was definitely an interesting journey. There's some great photos.
So I have a question, but how well did veterinary school prepare you for your small business ownership?
Not at all.
Preparation?
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, your success is basically the school of hard knocks, making lots of mistakes, resilience, tenacity, and grit.
I call it a street MBA.
Yes.
Street MBA.
That's a great thing. So Christie, how much was it like 6 or 8 hours that we had of business?
If you recall that, I'll support your recollection. I
Yeah,
don't recall
it
it
was,
at all.
it was so minuscule, and
We had a veterinary business management association, and I remember I know the person who headed that up at our school, but quite frankly, I had no business training at Tufts that I recall.
Did your financial advising background help you at all?
Not directly. I think it helped me just gain a acronym for numbers. But no, I mean, I took all these security tests, and I don't think that they directly played a role, but I started looking at things in terms of a numbers perspective, and I think that did help. But no, it truly was, like Christy alluded to, a street MBA. And when you're going through this process, I mean, everything from forming your corporate entity to deciding where the electrical outlets go. I mean, it's so multifaceted, all the aspects that you have to think through when you're building a hospital. And so we just had to research and find the right people to support us in terms of knowledge base and take it from there.
So Christy, did you learn from some of Rebecca's challenges and vice versa?
I think so. I think that we had a lot of the similar challenges. I think that construction was definitely a challenge for both of us. You know, that is a challenging world to understand and get through. I think we both had really good architects, so that was helpful. But I remember just going through it together. I think that she and I would call each other pretty regularly with questions, updates, challenges. And it's fine. I can't remember any specifics right now, but we did it all the time during the process.
Yeah, I would just be driving into work or out of work, and I would, just Christy was on speed dial.
So how many people told you shouldn't do it and that you were crazy?
I remember my mom saying, my mom was not a supporting factor in that capacity, and she supported me my whole life. But she also saw how challenging it was for my dad at various times of his career. And so I think so for both my mother and my father, they both had a pretty significant amount of skepticism for me to pursue this path. My mom probably would have advocated for me to more have a traditional job, a 9 to 5, and raise my family. But it just wasn't in the cards for me in terms of, I always aspired to build my own entity and to bring my own way of doing something to my practice.
So here you are, the two of you going through this process, and you had each other to fall back on. I'm sure there were some tears and probably some grape-based drinks, although if you're nursing, it's probably the grape juice from that standpoint. What are some of the things that fit into the don't make the same mistakes that, well, let me start another question first. Did any of the jobs that you had prior to taking and becoming an entrepreneur give you some guidance? You talk about a street MBA, but did you learn what to do or what not to do based upon some of your prior jobs before you became an entrepreneur?
I mean, I think all jobs that you have, you learn as you go, right? I think interpersonal communication, I think composure, I think that there's learning how to navigate different personalities and different environments, I think is a valuable skill. Learning how to self-reflect and take personal responsibility is a valuable skill. And I think those can be learned in any position if you're paying attention. Really how you conduct business comes down to how you're able to frequently navigate others' emotions, I think is a very valuable skill. And I think that's regardless of what position you have.
And as I was working, I had my steady job at the time. I was working overnight emergency, but I would pick relief shifts up around town in order to help to pay down my student debt, which was very significant coming from Tufts. And during that process, I paid close attention, not even thinking I was going to open my own hospital, but I was paying attention to, like Christy was mentioning, the circumstances around her. So things I liked, things I didn't like, things I thought could be improved upon. And so as I'm going through various hospitals and getting different experiences, I was paying attention to those things. And then when it came time for me to brainstorm what my vision of a hospital would be, I was able to implement those things to build on greatness that I saw and to see things that I thought needed tweaking and to make those modifications. And I can give examples of that. So for instance, one of the things that when I was working in emergency, many of the sensitive conversations were happening for an oxygen dependent patient. It would happen in the exam room, not in the exam room, sorry, but the treatment room. And so what would happen inevitably would be a technician would come off of break and not realize the sensitive nature of what was happening. And so the mood coming off of the technician wasn't matching what the dynamic with the client patient was. And so I put oxygen in my exam room, and so that we could have a safe space to have those conversations. So just little things like that you identify and you're like, okay, well, maybe I can modify what I've seen already and improve upon it or make it my own.
And I think from my perspective, what I noticed more than anything was the changing culture in veterinary medicine and my desire to make a significant culture change to whatever extent I could to make the working environment better for veterinarians, veterinary technicians, and at the same time, in doing so, positively affect the client experience when they come in to see a veterinarian in a stressful situation.
So you're both serial entrepreneurs now. You couldn't stop at one. To the best of my knowledge, Rebecca, you have two.
Correct.
And unless there's one in the oven, that's all you've got at the moment.
I'm tired.
Okay. And Christie, you have at least a half dozen, and I'm not sure how many you have in your oven at the moment.
I have 6 operational and 2 under construction.
Does it
But
get
that, to the qualifier is they are smaller than Rebecca's second one, significantly so.
Yeah, it's just a question whether you're juggling basketballs or ping pong balls. It's still juggling. Does it get easier the more you do? I mean, do you learn each time you go through the development of your practices?
Yes, in my experience, if one were as hard as 2, I probably wouldn't have done a second one. Personally, I found the first one to be far, far easier than the second one. My most challenging expansion was the second hospital. Granted, at that time, I was also pregnant and then subsequently had my daughter while I was developing the second location. So it was a challenge, but there were a number of challenges with the second location that I did not experience with the first. It was very hard to get that one open. Once we got that one open, 3 took a little while longer, and 3 actually opened mid-COVID. So summer of COVID was when hospital number 3 opened. So there were unique challenges with that. But to answer your question, I developed a scalable model intentionally, and so and we have kept the majority of the same team going forward. So we have learned and we have standardized, and we have focused on maintaining our culture more than anything, and we've been successful in that thus far.
So I want to repeat some things for the listeners that are take-home messages. Scalable, standards, systems, team, all coming together, because if you treat each business as a separate entity, it becomes, it's Groundhog's Day. You just repeat the same mistakes every day. So I think by having a systems-based standard operating procedures way of doing things, without using the term franchise and McDonald's, you have created a consistent way of doing things that makes each one different but the same. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're correct in that. There's some literature on that in the business world, going from the entrepreneurial model to the corporate model. And that's something that I feel I successfully navigated. I probably should have read more about it before I tried to do it, but just like anything else, I just plowed ahead. Probably would have been easier if I had educated myself before he did it, but there is a term for that. And to answer your question, we don't standardize across the board. Obviously, it's veterinary medicine. People practice medicine their own way. But things that have come up are creating formulary, right? So when we started Hospital 1, Hospital 2, then Hospital 3, we went from 1 doctor to 3 doctors to 8, and now we have almost 50. They're going to want different things on the shelf. And originally I said, yeah, sure. Fast forward, I've got expiring medications. We have to go through a formulary. And so putting together that formulary was challenging to relatively standardize across the board. And as we grow, we will have to become probably a bit more so, but my goal is to maintain our culture more than anything. And that does support independent veterinary medical practice. And I'll just stop growing if we lose that. And that's a personal decision that I'll make. I will not corporatize to the point where I can't support individual veterinary medical practice.
Yeah, and the hard part in the veterinary side of things is hard to standardize because doctors are doctors, but some of the operational things that are non-veterinary, why we can't get that figured out, I don't know. I mean, I think that's where a lot of frustrations come in. Why can't we all answer the phone the same way or balance out at this, put a pack together? So I think when I talk about and write about systems, it's more on the operational side than on the clinical side. And I think that we can do both, but it's really hard to get veterinarians to follow rules from that standpoint.
We employ 50, so yeah.
So you've got 50. So Rebecca, you've got two different business models, don't you?
I do. So I started off with a general practice. And so that was something that initially when I segued from overnight emergency and to day practice, the thought that Christie was talking about in terms of culture of the hospital was critically important to me. And so I started off with a skeleton crew as myself, and I was working 7 days a week. And I had one receptionist and 2 technicians and some relief help for Sundays. And I plowed through and slowly grew that practice. And then when I was having interactions with the referring hospitals in the area, there was aspects that I liked and things I thought could be improved upon. And the parts that I thought could be improved upon were significant enough where I felt like, well, what if I created my own? And so that's what happened, is that then I opened a specialty hospital that was far enough away that it could be viewed as independent, because it truly is an independent hospital. There's no self-referral, back to the general practice in terms of other referring veterinarians to be concerned about or anything along those lines. That's what happened. So the hospital is a specialty emergency hospital. It's a 24/7 hospital, meaning that you're on 24/7. And that happens on an entrepreneur basis, whether Christie's the same. It doesn't matter if it's a day practice or not. You're going to be always completely immersed in your hospital in terms of wanting to be available if and when there's an issue.
So one of the fear factors of the young veterinarians is, can I have a life and own a business and have a family and own a business? And I'm an entrepreneur as well. I started my practice 3 years out of school, made every mistake under the sun, then learned how to fix them, wrote some books about these sorts of things. And I think what we have here on our discussion today is we have 2 young female parents and entrepreneurs who have been successful in balancing, and I use that word with trepidation because I'll let you say yes or no from a balancing standpoint, balancing all of the balls and not dropping them all that often. So I think some of the messaging that I want to get across is, talk about your ability to balance ownership, entrepreneurship, parenthood, and your own lives, and whomever wants to go first. But I think it's important that message get out so we can create another generation of young entrepreneurs as well.
So for me, the best advice I can give is to know and hold your own boundaries. As an entrepreneur, as an employer, as you grow, I mean, there's a difference between being an entrepreneur and having your own practice, right? It's you're subject to your client's demands, your patient's demands. When you start to grow and have employees, you're going to be subject to your employees' demands as well. And knowing and understanding your own boundaries, I think is vital. And supporting that in your employees as well. And saying that email can wait. I can answer that another time. I need to focus on my family. Because right, if you have this beautiful business and your family life is struggling, and that's not a sacrifice I would encourage anyone to make, right? So I really think it comes down to knowing and holding your own boundaries. And I encourage our hospital managers, our team members to do the same. You don't have to be available for your patients 24/7. I believe that US culture has transitioned a little bit away from sort of the work. I was on call, so you have to be on call. I think that am I old enough to say the next generation coming in? I think that they're much better at holding their boundaries. And I think a lot of us in this generation and the one behind me, they tend to judge that negatively. And quite frankly, one of the reasons why I've been successful as an entrepreneur is because I judge that positively. I support them holding their boundaries, because if they're not able to have 100% in their own life, I feel it's very challenging to bring 100% to your work life. So that would probably be my biggest recommendation if you're trying to make that transition. I have a lot more to say on the subject, but that would be number one.
For me, in terms of my experience, I can say that the first year my daughter, I opened the practice, my daughter was 1. I had planned on having a nanny suite upstairs. So I had like a little upstairs area, and I outfitted out to do that. Inevitably, when my daughter saw me, she would reach for me and start to cry. And so I found myself at times taking her into the exam room with me, bopping her on my hip and thinking, oh my gosh, this is so unprofessional. So I transitioned away from that idea, and then she was at home with childcare. And that was really hard for me, because that first year I was working 7 days a week, until the point where 2 clients kind of back to back said, Doc, you're not looking so good. And that was a time where I had to make a pivot and realize that there was sacrifices beyond what I was able to continue to sustain. And so that's when I changed and closed the hospital for Sunday. So at least I could have that one day where the hospital was closed. Then when the pandemic happened, that was a whole nother beast, because all of a sudden we were just beyond capacity, and I was trying to fit in absolutely every patient that I could, because patient care was needed. And it was really, really rough. So for me to say that it hasn't been without significant navigation and challenges, I think that does need to be addressed, because there's definitely been periods that were really tough to navigate that balance between the family time that I wanted to have and the business demands that were being required of me. And so that's part of the entrepreneurship as well, is just knowing that, I'm better at setting boundaries now. But that being said, I'm also tethered to my phone, so that I'm always a call away if anything's needed.
Yeah,
I would encourage, I wanted to add a little bit more, if that's okay,
Sure.
Peter.
Yeah.
I would encourage people to hire when you can, and hire when you don't think you can. I find that a lot of veterinarians say, I can't afford an associate, or I can't afford this. We've been in a position in veterinary medicine for a long time that if you build it, they will come, and trusting that the business is there and doing your best. And Rebecca and I have spent hours on the phone talking about getting the right support. It's challenging to get the right support, but I think the best advice I could give is hire when you can, and hire before you think you can, because getting to that point of burnout will only negatively affect you, your mental health, your business. But be selective in who you choose, because if some people, what's the phrase? If some people can't, some people will sink the ship just because they can't captain it. So be careful. Choose wisely.
Yeah. I'm a big advocate for always be hiring, because you're about 30 seconds away from a 2-week notice, which ends up being a 2-hour notice, or that you don't get notice at all. And that goes with doctors as well as managers and everybody in between. So always be hiring, but hire for the culture of your practice, and not just hire warm bodies that can fog a mirror or have a pulse, or at least one of the two. And we
That's where Christie and I have excelled at, is that we've always put a focus on our culture and held that as at the forefront. And so, and we protect it fiercely.
Fiercely. I will say I'm very proud. Our attrition rate at VUCC is extremely low. We have people who, actually the majority of people who started with us are still with us if they live in the country. There's one that lives in Texas, one that lives in Argentina, but generally everyone that we started with is still with us. And we've gone from myself and 5 employees to we have over 160 at this time.
Yeah, I would suggest that, a lot of veterinarians use their average client transaction as their benchmark for success. I think the real benchmark for success is this average longevity of your employees, because that tells you a measure of how you're running your business. And we know that when people stay, you're going to be much more profitable, because losing people impacts your profitability. It also impacts your stickiness of your clients. Staff retention equals client retention. Now, a little bit less so in urgent care, because you're not really looking to have the same relationship as you have in a day practice, but you still want them to come back to your practice because they had a good experience. And that's the culture as well. So, it's interesting. You use the term culture, both of you. I'm not sure we know how to define it, but could you try to describe the culture you're looking to live up to?
Actually, I did.
Okay.
So back in 2021, I took, I think, 8 people who'd been with us from the beginning, who had gone from 1 hospital to 3 hospitals, and we were planning on building more. And I sat them down and I said, "Why are you still here? Why did you stay with me?" And I had our communications director take notes, and we developed our mission statement. We have our mission, vision, values. I can certainly read them if you'd like, but we have our mission, vision, values, and it's a culture of respect, community, compassion, and we wrote them out and defined them. Every single employee has them, and we include them in the job description. And I will say right here, I've absolutely used them as basis for termination if necessary. So medical practice may be great, but if you cannot abide by our culture and our mission, vision, values, it's a violation of your employment agreement and you can't work here.
Rebecca, how about you?
So similar thought process in terms of, but less defined, but it's a hospital where the focus is on being positive. Obviously, we want to practice best quality, best standards of medicine. But I'm very selective in terms of the personalities that I choose and how those all blend together. Because the last thing I want is for a hospital where people don't enjoy their colleagues and enjoy being. And like Christie had also mentioned, I've had to make tough decisions based on the fact that not always has that been upheld. And so fiercely protecting that culture and making sure that that's held at the forefront, I think is been tantamount to the growth that I've seen in the hospital.
In speaking as I do to a lot of veterinarians around the country, you guys are unicorns. Most practices, I'd say 25% of all the hospitals in my scientific surveys have a vision, a mission. More have core values. Why? Because they're easier to define. But you've got less than a third of the practices have vision, mission, and values. So they really have no direction. And I think by defining that direction and making it foundational, oh, and by the way, you're good leaders, because you can't have any of these things without having leaders who have a vision. You help to build a strong foundation for your practice. And I'm sure many of your jobs lacked that, and you just went about the job. And what I'm hearing is you have made a concerted effort to build an environment for your team that supports them, but also delivers upon your practice vision. So correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I'm hearing.
Well, for me specifically, it's the reason I started the company.
Yes.
Quite frankly, I didn't spend 12 years in school to go to a job that I hated every day.
Right.
I didn't spend 12 years in school to make somebody else tons of money while I wasn't there to breastfeed my daughter. And as this profession has transitioned to strongly female dominant, women are extremely hard workers, but they do need a flexible workspace in which to do what they do best and do what they're passionate about, but also to be supportive of their family life. And at the end of the day, and I think this is applicable across all industries, the legal industry in particular, if you ask a woman to choose between her kids and a job that she's better at than the majority of her male counterparts, it doesn't matter how much money you throw at her, she'll leave. And I think Rebecca and I intuitively know this, and this is something that I think is applicable to across all companies. Show a little bit of flexibility and support, and you'll get 150% at work.
Well said.
Yeah, no, but it's interesting because your willingness to think that way is what has allowed you to be successful. As you know, whether it's at the corporate entity or in a veterinary entity, well, if you want that, sorry, that's not what we're looking for. Of course, most of them are my age.
That's fine. They can come work for me and we'll keep growing quietly over here.
But this is all about creating the next generation of successful entrepreneurs. And I think your messaging is right there. If you want to have control of your life, it's not by working for somebody else. It's by being the person in control who sets the lane lines and the bumpers in which you're going to operate.
It depends. I think that there are different personalities, right? There are certain personalities that are well suited to an entrepreneurial path. There are other personalities that aren't. There are other personalities that want to go to work, they want to do their job, and they want to leave their job at their job. And I think that both positions are defensible and supportable. And I think that you can have a very, very good career path. Quite frankly, if I could go back and just work for myself at 28 hours a week, it wouldn't be such a bad idea. But at the end of the day, being, your own boss and finding that true, you work towards financial freedom, right? But then you also work towards time freedom, and you want to get to a point where your most valuable asset is no longer financial, it's time.
So are you both, if you go and speak to the veterinary students at Tufts or at Western, Rebecca, because you're here, or at Davis, and they say, should I be a hospital owner? What are you going to tell them?
I think in terms of what Christie touched upon is not everyone is meant for the entrepreneurial path, and some others would be not satisfied without. And I think being able to recognize that within yourself is critical. I am still in the thick of things in terms of growing the hospitals, and I don't have that feeling of time independence that Christie was alluding to. I'm still kind of thick in the weeds right now. And so I hope to grow into that role at some point down the road. But in terms of recognizing that I will never be able to leave my job and walk off at the end of the day and be done until the next shift. And so if that's not in your wheelhouse of what you want your life to look like, then don't pursue this path. But if you want to build something that's your vision, that you believe in, that you create, that is the way to do it.
I would second that. If I were standing in front of a group of veterinarians or soon-to-be veterinarians, I would ask them to self-reflect and decide what they want. Are you the type of person that wants to go to your job, have your kids? Great, awesome, that's wonderful. If you're the type of person, like Rebecca said, that has a vision, wants to make a difference, wants to make a change, wants to grow, and feels always just a little bit unsatisfied with the employee realm, and that's just something within yourself. I think Rebecca and I just both happen to have it, and I think that if people do take some time to self-reflect, and if they know they have it, they should absolutely do it. They should know that it's not going to be easy. It will be hard, but there are people and resources. I know Rebecca and I will be the first ones to say that we will be here to support you if you decide to take that path, and we will do everything in our power to help you become successful and help you navigate the trials, tribulations, and challenges. But it's so worth it, in my opinion.
So I want to see what the reaction is. I want to learn about your kids. It's exactly, by the way, since you can't see it, when I said that, I got smiles from both Rebecca and Christie when I said, tell me about your kids. So tell me about your kids. Who's going first?
So I'll go and talk about Natalie, who's now 7 years old. Outside of my first hospital is her little handprints and her little feet prints with the year 2017 in concrete. And she was the basis for me wanting to pursue this path in terms of, I hope to build something that she can at some point, benefit from in terms of a lifestyle and being able to be present for her and financially provide for her. But she's tenacious. She's a spitfire. She warms my heart beyond any measure. And everything I do in the back of my mind is I'm doing it for her.
Do you see yourself in her?
I do. I do in terms of, I'm not as feisty as she is in terms of, she's definitely has quite a spirit about her, but in terms of the lightness about her and her joyfulness, I aspire to continue to uphold those models.
Have you gotten Dr. Barbie veterinarian for her yet?
No, she's gonna go her own path. So yesterday it was gonna be a lifeguard. And so we'll see what it was. But yesterday I asked her, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she said a lifeguard. So we'll see if things change down the road.
She likes the Speedos, I guess. Christie, tell me about yours.
I mean, same. I'll talk about my daughter all day. So I have one daughter. Her name is Stella. She is 5 years old, and very similar to Natalie, probably because Rebecca and I are very similar. She is fierce and strong-willed and fun and funny. She tells jokes, but they're not. She doesn't get them quite right, but they're hilarious just because they don't make any sense sometimes. She loves to learn. She loves the ocean. We spend a lot of time traveling, and she hasn't wavered. She has been saying what she wants to be for probably about 6 months now, maybe a little bit longer even. And I believe her. She is an artist. She will tell you she is an artist. She draws every day. She practices every day. She draws things from her iPad. She draws things from movies. She draws every day. But she also wants to be an artist and have a cat sanctuary at her house.
Are either of them Swifties?
Oh goodness, Stella is, and it was. Hey, I mean, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, I absolutely love Taylor Swift. I mean, hats off. But Stella became a Swiftie. Actually, I didn't really listen to Taylor Swift much, but one of her nannies and I had introduced her to a Taylor Swift song, and I came home and she was singing it, and now we haven't stopped listening to Taylor Swift for the past year.
Yeah, for me, when I'm having a tough day, sometimes I'll put on the tune, I Shake It Off.
Yeah.
Shake it off.
Have you heard the new one? Lights, camera, smile. It is very entrepreneurial. It's very entrepreneurial.
You know, this has been fun. I enjoy watching the two of you play off each other. The umbilical cord is still attached, no matter how long it's been since you graduated from Tufts. I appreciate your entrepreneurial spirits. I appreciate your advocacy for the veterinary profession. And I appreciate you being cheerleaders for the next generation of veterinarians. And whether it is in New England, whether it is in California, or hopefully everywhere in between, the listeners have gotten that same energy from the two of you and will be motivated to chase their dreams, whatever they may be, but also to find your right hand, left hand, both hand person, because I think, and I'll make my own interpretation, I think your individual successes are part of your group success. I think you are there to support each other. And I can't emphasize enough how important that is in this profession, with all of the stressors, with all of the external variables and internal variables that we do. To have a support group like you have in each other is extremely important. And so I hope that both of you would be willing to support others who might be looking to do the same thing. And I think, Christie, you said that a little bit earlier, but how can people reach out to you who might be going through a similar situation, not sure what to do, and need a cheerleader? If you would share your best way to reach each of you, that would be wonderful.
I am always available via text or email. Please don't call.
Yeah.
I won't answer, but any text or email, I will respond immediately via text or email. My email address is just my first initial, my last name. So C D'Andrea with no punctuation at veturgentcare.com. And my phone number is in my email signature, and I do respond to text. So I can always set up, I'm happy to set up a phone call, even just a chat with any prospective entrepreneurs or vet students or anyone. I find a lot of joy in talking to people about their path and being a resource to help the next generation find their path.
And for me, in terms of, I have so many different contact forms and a couple different telephone numbers. So probably best way is LinkedIn is one way, because I respond to those messages actually. So that would be a great way to find me, and then I can give you the best contact means.
I would love to just keep diving into this conversation, but I can't. I got to respect both of your times today, and I really want to thank you for sharing your story, sharing your insights, and again, helping to pave the way for young female entrepreneur parents that you can do it, you can enjoy it, and you can make a difference. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks to our listeners for joining us today on our discussion of classmates to entrepreneurs. We appreciate you listening very much. I also want to take a moment to appreciate you individually. So thank you. We can't do this without you. If you like our podcast, kindly share it with your colleagues and friends on social media. Also, please don't forget to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your reviews will help other doctors and practice owners find us. Until next time, keep striving for excellence and making a positive impact in the lives of patients and pet parents. Wishing you all an amazing week full of tenacity, resilience, and grit. So thank you both.
Thank you, Peter.